Sarah. Good. She is new to our community, having lived in Wenatchee for only 6 months. Julie's going to tell us about some of the places that she's lived, and for her, how the places are related to her identity. She'll present her icebreaker speech about finding her place in the world. Julie?
Fellow members, I recognized the image immediately. A small figure stood within an expansive labyrinth with perplexing shapes all around. This is an Anasazi symbol, and it represents a person's search for her place in the world. I recognize that tiny figure as myself. This has been a common theme in my life, trying to find my place in the world. When I first saw this symbol, I was in Seattle. This was several years ago. And I was at a newly opened restaurant called Chaco Canyon. And they were using the symbol on their menu and on their business cards. And it reminded me of when I was in New Mexico. I had lived in New Mexico for some time, hoping to find that as my place in the world. I lived on the Navajo Indian Reservation, and I really enjoyed my time there when I drive down dusty roads and go to places like the Grand Canyon, or I go to Mesa Verde. And I'd practice my Navajo on the way, Yatehe. And I would do things on the Navajo Indian Reservation that was very exciting to me and very new, doing things like creating sand paintings and attending rug auctions and sampling meal-down bread at the local flea market. But I did not stay in New Mexico. I decided to search for my place in the world somewhere else. And I consulted a map and decided that Seattle, Washington looked pretty cool because it was surrounded by mountains and water. And I heard that it had a really nice scene, and that was important to me at the time. And so I moved up to Seattle, and I lived in Seattle for many, many years, and I enjoyed much of what the city had to offer, which was plenty, from its green parks and sparkling beaches to their wonderful library system with almost any book you can imagine to check out. The lecture series at the town hall meetings, and all the music they had available, and theater, so many things. And Seattle was an exciting place to live for many years. But Seattle did have a downside. There was always a big problem for me with Seattle. And that was the fact that there's just no spring there. It just kind of goes from rain and more rain, 40 degrees and rain, until July 5th when there's finally summer, but there's really no spring in Seattle. So I thought that perhaps my place in the world was where I grew up, and that's in the Milwaukee area of Wisconsin. And I would think back to the summers there and think of the smell of the tall grass and think of the nights filled with fireflies. And I always enjoyed when the summer air turned crisp and became fall. And in the winter, I would often get my car stuck in the snowbank, but plenty of wonderful people would come out and help me dig it out each time. And then the spring would arrive, and I would always look for the blooming of the lilacs, because to me that meant that spring was really here. And then we'd have nice weather and summer would be on its way. But I was still in Seattle and would live there for many more years, though I did dare myself at one time to go and move away and live in a different country. So I moved to Cusco, Peru, and had a wonderful time walking down the cobbled street and examining the Inca rock that was in the city. I would go to magical places like Machu Picchu, which was a place that would really heal the soul, and I would search in places like the Sacred Valley and go to towns like Ollantaytambo, which were just fun to say because they had so many syllables. And Cusco, Peru was just a place that had so many amazing sights. It seemed like every week there was a parade full of colorful costumes and masks and smiling people, and everyone seemed to dance. It just seemed such a wonderful place to be, and I really thought that I had found my place in the world. And I ran out of money, so I had to go back to Seattle. And at the time when I left, I really thought I was going to go back to Cusco. I'd save up some money, go back to Cusco, and open an English school there and teach English. But that was not meant to be. So life can be very beautiful in its simplicity, but it can also be very overwhelming with all the choices we have, at least for those of us who are lucky enough to have as many choices as I do. So what happened is my desire to go back to Peru, back to Cusco, started to compete with my wanderlust because I wanted to go and see some other countries. And so I went to places like Vietnam, and I went to Egypt, I went as far as Mongolia, and those are stories in themselves. But I would always take that road, take that plane, and get back to Seattle, and where I continue to live. But I started to not like Seattle as much because it became worse as I lived there for years. It just became a jungle full of cars, and it just seemed like the rain got worse, or maybe it just got under my skin. I couldn't take it anymore, all that rain and traffic. I just really had enough. And although I had thought about it for some time about perhaps leaving, it happened just one day, just quickly. I decided I was breaking up with Seattle. I didn't want to be there anymore. So I decided on that day to look elsewhere. And I'd always seen this wonderful town I had been through, this nice town on the other side of the mountains where there was a lot of sun, Wenatchee. So here, I relaxed my search for a place of my own in this world, because I know that as long as my feet are on the ground and I have a clear head and a clean heart, that I have found my place in the world. And my place in the world is wide and far, and just like the Anasazi Labyrinth. And I'm very happy to be here now in this small corner of the labyrinth in this beautiful, charming town of Wenatchee.